So one of the latest swatches that I was working on, which was the Polka Eyelet stitch, I ended up just continuing with the swatch because I was so enjoying the actual pattern, and I ended up just keeping on knitting, which really isn't very helpful because I need to do other swatches as well of other knitting stitches to show you, but I seemingly couldn't help myself. And fortunately, a reader's got in touch and wanted to know more about how this pattern is created. So it's actually a 8-row repeat, and it is truly just a matter of yarn overs and purls together, plus rows of knits and purls. But I've come to the first row and in the pattern, and I was just going to do a short video on how that actually works. So the first row are knit stitches, and what I've found with this particular pattern is that it creates a fabric that is very stretchy, and it looks like it's knit on the bias, so it kind of leans a little bit. So it would be important to make sure that when you are making the fabric and you finished it, that you actually block it well so that it sort of takes out that angled look and you get a straighter fabric. And the other thing that I've noticed too is that I'm using a yarn, as you know if you've been watching my videos, that's cotton and acrylic, so it has got some stretch, but certainly if you were doing this particular pattern in wool yarn, you would find that would be even stretchier. So the next row, which is number 2, are all purls. And I was thinking about the way that I've been knitting, and I'm not sure if you're like me, but you envy people who seemingly knit super fast. And I think, wow, I'd love to be able to knit that quickly. But I think even though I do knit regularly, my technique is still a little slow. And I've watched people who do continental knitting, and I've seen people do all sorts of different techniques with purling. So someone was showing how you do the Norwegian purl, and I think I've realized that it's really about whatever works for you. And do I need to get faster? Look, it would obviously save me time to be able to knit quicker, but I also think part of the beauty of knitting is that you don't necessarily have to do it quickly. Just getting some yarn out so I can continue. Alright, so this is where one of the third row, I should say, is where the yarn overs occur. And this row starts with a purl 1, and then the repeat is yarn over. It's wrapping your yarn around your needle, so I'll show that again. So it's still purl, and to create a yarn over when you're on a purl row, you can't just simply leave the yarn just as you would if you were knitting, because it doesn't actually create the yarn over. So you actually have to wrap the yarn around the needle, and then it's a purl 2 together. And this is repeated until the end of the row. So wrap your yarn around the needle, purl 2 together, wrap around yarn around the needle, purl 2 together. And this particular row is what creates that texture on the front side of the work, because then you go and purl the back of it, and then it pops out when you knit the next row. So I'm continuing that along the row, wrapping my yarn around the needle and purl 2 together. And I'm coming up to the last purl 2 together, and then I actually purl that last stitch. And then row 4, so see how that's created the yarn overs. Then purling is the next row, so this is number 4. So as you can see, it's quite a simple pattern because most of the rows are either knitting or purling. And as I said, I've really enjoyed knitting this pattern. I think it would make a really lovely pillowcase. I think it's a little bit, to me, it's a little bit holey for a blanket. And a scarf, I'm not so fond of scarves that have holes in them. I prefer a denser fabric. Can look pretty, be quite lovely actually in perhaps a really fine yarn. Okay, I'm coming up to the end of the purl row. And 5 is a knit row, and you'll see how the actual bumps pop out in this row now by knitting it. I hope that your projects are coming along nicely. Lately I've been helping to promote some of the events that are going along all around the world, and I'm thinking how wonderful it would be to be able to get to all the knitting events that are offered to people. They look truly spectacular, particularly in places like national parks and in the Highlands of Scotland, and communities getting together in Canada, and also a wonderful music festival that includes yarn bombing, which it looks amazing, jumpers and jazz in July in a place called Warwick in Queensland. And then the next row is a purl row. So as I said, this is very easy to remember and to execute. Doesn't really take much effort to remember this repeating pattern. Then once I finish this purl row, it's the next row, which is row 7, and that has the purl 2 togethers and yarn overs, but it's slightly different to the row 3 because it's simply a purl 2 at the start, then wrap the yarn around the needle and purl 2 together until the end of the row, and then you finish off with a purl row. So that was row number 6. Row number 7 starts off with 2 purls. Then wrap the yarn around the needle, purl 2 together. Wrap the yarn around the needle, purl 2 together. And I'm just going to continue that on for the rest of this row. Trying not to split this yarn. And if you've been listening to my videos or following the swatching that I've been doing, you'll know that these knitting stitches are coming out of a knitting stitch directory that was published back in the late 80s, and it's quite lovely actually working out of a book. There are some assumptions made about what you might know or not know, and the pictures aren't always, and just interrupting myself here, but this is the final row and this is row 8 and it's a simple purl row. Yeah, so some of the stitches in the pictures don't show up the texture as well as what the actual real swatch looks like. So sometimes it's hard to see if you've got what you're doing is actually right, but as I've worked through a number of these stitch patterns now, I just think if it looks good, then that's all you need to worry about really. But yeah, it's when we're working with the internet now and people have got all their patterns mostly available via digital PDF, and then there's also so many wonderful experts out there who offer tutorials on YouTube. I'm forever grateful to those people because I've learnt so much from them. Final stitch, and then that has created the 8-row repeat of the the polka eyelet stitch. Polka eyelet stitch. So I hope you get a chance to try that out yourself, and I'll see you next time. All the best with your own projects. Bye for now.